What we have with us today is one of the most talked about adventure bikes in the world. But the exciting part of today's story is that we're not anywhere in the world. We are right here in India. Now, if you remember, a short while ago, we reported to you that CFMoto was about to enter India. We rode some of their 3-cylinder and twin-cylinder bikes abroad, but we told you that the 450MT was going to be the first bike for India, and here it is. We're here in Hyderabad at the local partners facility to ride the bike. They've asked us not to mention who they are just yet. That news will be out soon. But they did want us to see what this bike is like to ride in our conditions. Now, today is not a detailed full-on review. We've just ridden it for a couple of hours out on the road to see how the 450MT fits into our riding ecosystem and where it stacks up in our market. And there's a lot of good news to share. Now, since this is a brand new product to us from a pretty new company to us, I think it's good to start with the style, and they've knocked it out of the park with this motorcycle. Just from an overall silhouette standpoint, this looks and feels like a big adventure bike in a way that none of its rivals like the Himalayan, the 390 Adventure really managed to do. It feels like a big machine. You've got that proper ADV fender, big stacked headlamp, really wide fuel tank. It's 17 liters, which is the same as a Himalayan, but when you sit on it, you really get the impression that you're on a big bike. This view looks good as well. Narrow screen. It is height adjustable. In fact, there's a lot of interesting things on this motorcycle, but to stick with the design features, I think they've really nailed what an ADV bike should look like. You've got a big upswept exhaust, and if you look more closely, there's some smaller interesting details, like the fact that this bike has cross-spoked wheels which enable tubeless tires. You've got fully adjustable front suspension, you've got compression and rebound adjustable rear suspension, you've got a really interesting seat height mechanism. Now, CFMoto has taken a different approach here. Internationally, you could change the seat or you could buy a different shock linkage if there's a linked monoshock. But what CFMoto has done is they've taken the existing shock linkage and they put two mounting points in there. So if you want to lower the seat height, you can put it on the lower mounting point. And that means that you have a bike which has a seat height of 800 mm, which is the lowest in the class, and it goes up to 820 if you fiddle with that. But if you're someone tall, you want a really tall seat, they'll sell you an accessory seat that takes it up to 870 mm. So they have thought about it. But it's more than just the overall look of this bike that is so appealing. It's because when you come up close, you'll notice that the attention to detail, the quality, the finish all around is really very good. I think it's the best you'll find at this price point. Just the anodization on the metal surfaces, the kind of quality of the plastics that they've used, the way the panels all fit together. Really, it feels like a premium expensive motorcycle, more so than what it actually is. Another nice feature that they're giving you, they really think about this, is it has ADV style mirrors. So if you're off-road, you want to get the mirrors out of the way so that they're not hitting branches, not fouling with your elbows. Just fold the mirrors in, back on the road, get them back out there. So there's a lot of thought that has gone into this motorcycle. But what is it actually like to ride? Well, that's interesting. And I think the big factor of this motorcycle and what's really going to appeal to most of the buyers out there compared to the competition is the engine. This is a 270-degree crank 450cc parallel twin engine, and it's a really lovely thing. Let's start with how it sounds. So it's very much a 270 crank sound, but it's also a little different. There are a couple of other engines in India which already have this 270 crank configuration. One is the Aprilia 457, which sounds a little different to this. It's a slightly deeper sound, more inspired by the Aprilia RS 660. And then there's Royal Enfield 650. We know that engine well. It's a little more muted, a little more refined sounding than this motor. So this does have a bit of its own identity. Out on the road, the defining factor, at least in this segment, is smoothness. And that's something that you would expect with a twin-cylinder engine. Vibrations are pretty much negligible, nothing worth mentioning right here, whether it's foot pegs, seat or handlebar, and the engine pulls you forward very smoothly. Now, there are a couple of things to keep in mind here. One is that the gearing is really very short. You can go over speed breakers in third gear, you can even set off from a standstill in second gear. In India, this is a nice thing because we spend a lot of time in densely packed, slow moving traffic where you're constantly slowing down, starting again, and you can use that flexibility, stay in a higher gear and ride around lazily. If you're someone who's looking at a motorcycle like this to do a lot of high speed touring, long distance, I think you might want to play around with the final drive ratio, maybe put a bigger sprocket on in the front, see what that gives you, because the engine is at about 6,000 RPM at 100 kilometers an hour, 7,000 RPM at 120, and the red line's at about 9,000. But like I said, the vibrations really aren't an issue here. It's just that the engine feels like it's working a little hard. So maybe you'd want to calm that down if that's what you're after with this motorcycle. Now, we have largely ridden the road today on Hyderabad's outer ring road. Lovely roads, smooth tarmac, and cruising abilities are really very good. It has a rather small windscreen. It sort of reminds me of how the Himalayan does its wind protection, in that you do get some cooling wind to your body, but it also keeps a little bit of the wind away from you. Taller riders will probably prefer having this in the lower setting. When I raised it, I got quite a bit of buffeting from my helmet, but then again, if you opt for that taller seat, I think it'll raise you up and keep you in quite a comfortable zone when it comes to touring. The other thing to keep in mind with how this engine performs is, like I said, these bikes are here for validation testing, and the motorcycle that you see here was giving some inconsistent fueling. It wasn't running very smoothly, to the point that it felt so bad that I knew that this couldn't be the case with the motorcycle. Luckily, there was another one which we took out for a short ride, and it's much better. And the local distributor here assures us that when this bike goes on sale, the fueling will be absolutely smooth. So we will give them the benefit of the doubt for that for now. And speaking of our fuel, these will be E20 compliant, but the recommendation is to run 95 octane with this engine. That's what the local distributor is going to be recommending, because they find that it runs better on 95 octane. That would have been a problem a few years ago, but now 95 octane is widely spread across the country and it doesn't really cost that much more than standard fuel. So I think that's okay. The other aspects of performance that I can talk about right now is that the clutch is super light. It's more like a 150cc bike than anything in this category. There is no quick shifter. They will sell you an accessory upshift only quick shifter because it's a cable throttle, not ride-by-wire. But you do have a smooth shifting gearbox, and with that clutch, honestly, it works quite well. Now that's what I can tell you today about the engine. So let's move on to the seating position. And like I said, 800 mm, there's a good bend in my legs. The riding position is really quite comfortable. I thought that this would be a little cramped for me, but in about 2-3 hours of riding, I didn't have a problem. Maybe all day long as a tall rider, you would want a higher seat. So far, this has been okay. The actual seat itself could be a little more comfortable, but it's not really problematic. But I would also like to show you what the seat height is like for somebody else. So I'm going to ask Harshad behind the camera to put his camera down and come show us what that looks like. Harshad is 5'7" tall, and this is what the adventure bike looks like for him. Yeah, he's on tiptoes on both ends, but more manageable than the KTM, yeah? Okay. So that's what it's like for someone who's 5'7" tall. What I can tell you about the chassis and the way it rides from what I've experienced today is that this weighs about 195 kilos fully fueled, which is up there with the Himalayan 450 and a significant amount more than the KTM 390 Adventure. But the difference here is that it doesn't have as much of a top-heavy feel. It also doesn't lean as much in its side stand. The seat is lower. So shorter riders will probably find this easier to manage than the Himalayan, but I'm not sure if it's also easier to manage than the KTM 390 Adventure, because that bike really does feel lighter than the Himalayan and also this. As for on-road handling, stability at high speeds is very good. It's also a light steering system, so it doesn't feel like a cumbersome motorcycle. It leans over to the side quite nicely. These are CST tires like we also saw on the 675s in Portugal. These are heavily benchmarked on the Pirelli Scorpion Rally STRs. They really look like that. Performance-wise, they're fine. They work okay on the road. Can't speak for off-road, can't speak for wet conditions. I think there's enough grip on the road, maybe not the best feedback when the bike is leaned over. You can feel the tire sort of flexing, but the bike gives you confidence to corner quite well. We had basically 1 or 2 turns on the road. But with what we experienced today, this seems to be a fun and encouraging handler. It's not a sporty motorcycle, but it's also light and it's happy to go around a bend without really scraping anything or without making you feel uneasy. The only area where I'd like to see some improvement is in the braking. Like with the tires, the actual performance is more than adequate, but some additional power and bite at the front would be nice. Off-road performance is something I wish I could talk about. International reviews have raved about how well this bike handles. You've got 21-inch front wheel, 18-inch rear, adjustable suspension, 200 mm of travel at both ends, 220 mm of ground clearance. So the fundamentals are in place. What I can tell you today is there were some pretty big speed breakers, a collection of them, and the bike just skated really well. You could jump the whole thing if you wanted to, or you could run over all of them, and this bike stayed very composed. In general, suspension comfort, I don't think it's quite as soft and plush as the Himalayan on its standard setting, which has all the settings mostly in the middle ground. But I also felt that it takes landings from jumps and things like that better than the KTM and maybe better than the Himalayan as well. So there's an underlying feeling that this could take quite a beating off-road, and that's just on its stock setting. So the impression is good, and I can't wait to see what this is like to ride off-road when we get the chance to do that. Now, when will we get the chance to do that? Well, this motorcycle is due to launch in India in June, July this month. That's what we're told. Unfortunately, I can't tell you where you will be able to buy it yet. That news will be out soon. But I can tell you that hopefully the estimated price will be 3.5 to 4 lakh rupees. Now, the thing is, this motorcycle costs a little more than the Himalayan 450 internationally and less than the KTM 390 Adventure. Unfortunately, in India, it comes in as a CKD, which means it doesn't have the competitive advantage of the locally manufactured bikes. But CFMoto is keen to make a big impact here, and they are targeting an aggressive price. 3.5 lakh rupees would undercut the KTM 390 Adventure. And I think that this motorcycle should come in at an aggressive price because it's a fantastic machine, but it is from a Chinese manufacturer with a new distributor, and the company needs to convince people that it's worth going for this motorcycle, and a good price tag will definitely do that. But for me today, the initial impression, really very good. Whatever your impressions are about Chinese products, I can't tell you what to think about that, but I can tell you that this bike has impressed me today.